kind of messing with these things ever since. And when I chop on this, things are going to fly this way and that way. So I suggest everybody gets up that way. They will fly 40 feet sometimes. So I want to just warn you that these do fly out. It helps a lot to have a nice anvil underneath to help absorb the shock and let everything soak in. So we lead you up this way or that. Yeah, there you go. This is an archaic axe. The first axes in Illinois, they had a groove that went all the way around them, and they would last something like this. But they would get loose. And what happened is when you chop for a while, they start to get loose, and you'd have to unwrap this whole thing and rewrap it. So they went with that for about 2,000 years, and then they invented this 3/4 grooved axe. This has this flat spot back here with this piece of wood and a shim in it. Shim is a piece of wood that's thinner on one end than the other. When it would get loose, you could put your fingernail in there, tighten that shim up, use it for another 15 or 20 minutes, and it would loosen again, and then you tighten it back up again. Doc, you're going to be pretty close. You might want to get a little farther up. The same way over here. No, I'm a little more that way or this way. Yeah, it's going to fly. It's going to fly more this way because the log is slanted that way. So these were much better to work with because you had a way of tightening back up. If they get loose, what they'll do is they'll come into a notch like this, and then they'll hit, and then they'll fly over like that, and it'll nap off the bit. That's one of the breakage patterns. If you saw my program last night, we talked about this side slap breakage. The other way they break is if they're a celt. These become a celt later on at about 1000 BC. And then this is when it's wedged into the handle. It's a much better system. It doesn't get loose unless you want it to. If you want to take it out, let's say you're in a canoe, this handle's going to be in the way. All you do is hit it over the log. Well, this is a soft wood here, and it'll come loose easily. Yeah. Yeah, we'll try it on the knot. So when these come out, you can use them as a chisel or a wedge. Most tools have more than one use. This is a good example. It's kind of like using your screwdriver for a chisel. But even though it's made as one tool, it also is another one. What I learned is that if I put the handle or the stone back in the handle the wrong way, I'll split my handle, because I split 7 handles my first year. And we have around Cahokia Mounds near St. Louis, when we have axes that are symmetrical, and it's hard to tell what the front or back is, we have a tally mark right here. I got my fingernail in it. And that tells you, we've always wondered what it was. 150 years in the archaeological journals trying to figure out what they are. After I broke those 7 handles, I've realized that's a little tally mark to tell you what the front of your axe is. It's that simple. So then all you have to do is hit it, and it's seated. Well, it's not seated yet. I hit it wrong. Get my tally mark. There we go. What you do with this is you chop about 3 or 4 chops in one spot. Then you move over about 2 inches. See what I mean? Be careful over there, because they will fly. You really have to hold this fairly vertical, because it will want to side slap. That's why I make my handles oval, so that it won't turn very well in your hand. Now this is a fairly soft wood, and it doesn't cut as well as the harder woods we get. Black locust is my favorite, because it cuts very clean, and all pieces fly right out of there. Now if we can get some of these to come out a little farther. I'd like to see if you could pick one up. Take a look at it, and you're going to see that the last 1/4 inch is crushed. It also gives me a break. What happens is it cuts, and then it wedges. And that's why these things work so efficiently, even though they look very dull, because they wedge the stuff out. At Angel Mounds several years ago, I did a demo, and a cameraman came up and set up his camera with a tripod, TV camera. And I said, buddy, you might want to watch out, because this stuff really comes out here. Set up over here or back here. And he said, his exact words were, never mind, I'm a professional. So what it is, about this big came off, hit the center of the lens and knocked the camera, and he caught the camera before it fell over. That's what the power that this thing hits with sometimes. I never got the video. I wish I got the video. This axe has cut 400 trees from a 1/2 inch in diameter to 12 inches. Wow. Never been resharpened. This axe has cut 300 trees, 1/2 inch in diameter, 12 inches, never been resharpened. But old granddad here has cut 3,500 trees, 1/2 inch in diameter, 12 inches. This made the wood henge at Cahokia Mounds. It made the stockade around the Callahan Pit House at Cahokia Mounds, and a lot of other projects. I built a house on my property. It was in the SPT Bulletin a couple issues ago. So these things last a long time. When we find axes, these 3/4 grooved axes at the Bullseye site in Illinois, buried with ancient people, we find them used until there's hardly anything left. I've cut those 3,500 trees. I haven't lost a 1/16 of an inch. So if you think about how long that axe must have been used and how prized it must have been by either that person or the relatives to bury with him, it really gives another interpretation to archaeology. We can start shedding light, and that's what this is all about. We're shedding light on archaeology with this. And so if we can interpret what happens here and interpret that to archaeology as wow, these things must have lasted forever. This guy must have been some big guy, or you know, whatever it does. It helps in that quest. Now I have Big Mama here, and Big Mama I'm not going to use because I got the old handle that I broke here several years ago, and I've had some illness since then, and so I haven't put the new handle on. The handle broke, and 8 inches broke off the old handle, and I found out that I had more control with it. What I did is about, I think, Rabbitstick 2007, I went to Angel Mounds in Indiana, and I cut 2 notches in a log about 8 or 10 inches apart. And I did that with the black axe. That took a half hour to knock that notch out. All right, then I took one swing with Big Mama, if I got the picture right, and we knocked out the chunk in between. This axe was found, well, this is a replica of one that was found in a cache of 70 axes that were found just about 20 miles east of Fairbury Heights, where the Grossman site is. That's east of Cahokia Mounds. So when they said they were ceremonial, that's where the challenge, the gauntlet, was thrown down. Because we all know what happens when we don't know what something's used for. We call it ceremonial. So I decided that I would replicate it. I tried to replicate this with a 36-pound piece of basalt, and I worked with a flint hammerstone for 11.5 hours, and 6 inches broke off the end. Yeah, and it ruined my experiment. But I did have a 63-pound chunk, and I made this one with all modern tools. But in order to see if it worked right, I pecked from here down 6.5 hours to make the edge authentic. The rest you can see the grind marks on, but I'm really not worried about that. So you notice in that picture, when I hafted it, I had the handle way up here. And after a while, I realized I had no control. I could break the handles very easily. Then I realized that, okay, most of the other axes are wider at the bit instead of the middle. And I said, okay, that's what means that this has to come down to the middle, and it gives me much more control. Then I realized that the bit is narrower. Most axes, the bit is wider. And what they're doing is they're concentrating their blow. So I thought about this, and okay, when Marquette came down the Illinois River in 1673, he said he saw 70 men in a canoe with a fire going in the center of the canoe. Just think of that, 70 people. If you had 35 people abreast, that canoe is going to have to be a minimum of 6 feet wide, and you're going to need 3 feet at least for each man to row. So you're talking about a 140-foot long canoe. When Father Mimbers came down in 1675, he said he passed an Illinois village, and in that village there were several hundred canoes, many of which were 50 to 70 feet long. So our concept of what these people were doing at that time is very shallow. We're thinking about little canoes that we use today. They are making very large canoes that carry large amounts of weight. They're bringing Mill Creek flint from southern Illinois, probably by the tons, to Cahokia Mounds up the Mississippi River. They're bringing copper from the Great Lakes down the Mississippi River. And we're talking about some people that really got around. And so I started chopping big logs with this thing, and it wouldn't work. I could swing that other small axe so much better. And then I thought about Abraham Lincoln. I'm from Illinois, the land of Lincoln. And so Abraham Lincoln would stand on those logs, and he'd chop a notch with that broad axe, and then he'd chop another notch, and then he'd chop another notch, and then he'd take that big heavy broad axe and knock the chunk out in between. That's what made me realize what this was for. So even though it may be a ceremonial cache, I can't rule that out. But I can rule out that it's not functional.
It's axe mark.
I did one program on sometimes an axe is just an axe. Well, that's what this one is. And I can show you that it can be used. Just right now I don't have the handle to do that. But I can swing it over my head. You sure can't cut a tree down with it. You know, if you go sideways, I can't even get my arm down sideways. And I know, but with what I call a one-way axe, all you have to do is lift it up. It does all the work by itself after that. Also, in order to take a large chunk like that, you need something this massive. If you try to use those axes, they're not nearly heavy enough to take out a big chunk like that. So, with the experiments that we've been doing, just some people call it playing around. I don't know if I'd call it that. I think we've been doing pretty well with what we do. So, if anybody wants to try one of these, especially I'd rather have you use the black axe, because the other ones, especially the 3,500 one, I don't want to break that one. And that's a 24-year experiment. If I'm going to break it, I'd rather break that one myself. One of the other axes that we had broke off. Well, a 9-year-old boy broke one of my axes with the side slap. Came in like that and broke the axe off. That is one of the most common breakage patterns with axes. About 3/4 of them are that way. But there's another one where they break off clean, just straight across. And that's from overpowering. It's like putting a handle like that on an axe like this. When you swing it, I was actually swinging with my feet coming off the ground on a piece of black locust, and when it broke, it sounded like a rifle going off. And so those are the two breakage patterns that I've seen, and we see this archaeologically all over Illinois, all over the Midwest at least. So we're also, in fact, I've been asked to co-author some papers on axe breakage, and we're going to be working on that pretty soon. So if anybody wants to try it, all I ask is that when you chop, please get on one knee, be fairly vertical. Please do not come from the side. You want no more than a 5-degree angle. And you see when I hit there how it slips over? You want to be hold it pretty solid, and swing on it. Okay.